Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday Wonderings for this week. Last week's video on Wednesday, I talked a little bit about how we play a part in a story that's bigger than our own lives. And ideally, we want to find ourselves playing a role in God's story. I'd like to continue some of that thought today and wonder about how we play our part in God's story. Hebrews 11 has this long list of what you might call heroes of faith, but really they're not heroes at all. They're just everyday people that found themselves caught up in what God was doing in the world. And it goes like this. Faith is the reality of what we hope for, the proof of what we don't see. People of the past were approved by God because they had faith or trust in God. And it goes on. By faith, we understand that the universe has been created by the word from God, so that what was visible came into existence from what was invisible. By faith, Abel offered a better sacrifice to God than Cain, which showed that he was righteous, since God gave approval to him for his gift. Though he died, he still speaks through his faith. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he didn't see death, and he was no longer found because God took him up. And it goes on. By faith, Noah responded to God when he was warned about the events he hadn't seen yet, the coming flood. And he built an ark to deliver his household from the flood. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was going to receive an inheritance. He went out without knowing where he was going. By faith, he lived in the land that he had been promised. He lived in tents with Isaac and Jacob. He was looking forward to the future city that God had promised. By faith, Sarah received the ability to have a child, though she herself was unable to have children. And it goes on and on and on in Hebrews 11. By faith or trust in God's promises, these regular everyday people took up a part in God's story, in what God was doing. And they're by no means perfect. If you read the story of Abraham and Sarah, it reads more like a soap opera than the story of a family who is righteous. But yet God called on them and they played a part in God's story. And by trust in God's promises, in believing in what God said, they are written down in this book. And the end of Hebrews chapter 11, the writer of Hebrews says, these people by faith listened to God, they followed God, they found their story written in the book. And they're waiting for us to write our stories, to continue the story that God is writing. So it's interesting to think that even though maybe scripture is done being written, the story is still an open book. God's story is still being written in our lives. And how would Hebrews chapter 11 continue with you in that story? By faith, what would follow about your life? What would follow that people would take up and be inspired by your life, by your faith or trust in the God who made you, the God who called you, the God who is writing you in his story? How would your life continue that story? How does it? That's my wondering today. How does my life, how does your life continue that chapter in Hebrews 11? By faith, Kyle Fever and his family, blank. What would go there? What would go there for you? Wonder about that today. Wonder about that the rest of your life. But wonder about that and wonder where God is calling you and how you are playing your part in the story that's still being written for others to learn from, for others to put faith in God also. May your story continue the story of God today. We'll see you soon.